Perfect. Perfect. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ingrid Timbo. I'm the policy director at an organization called the Alliance for Global Water Adaptation, one of the core partners of the Water Pavilion at COP26. And it is such a pleasure to welcome you all to officially to week 2 of the first ever Water and Climate Pavilion at a UNFCCC COP. I hope that all of you are as energized as I was from last week. We've had dozens of sessions on everything from nature-based solutions to energy to finance and community-led adaptation. And today we're going to kick off with a very, very full day specifically focused on adaptation and resilience. This is also the theme at the COP overall today as well, so there's tons of sessions happening everywhere, and I hope you're able to join us. You know, there's a reason why this is actually our most packed day. We've already started. We've already had one session from the Australian Water Partnership and their collaborators around the Pacific Islands. And so if you didn't have a chance to see that earlier today, I really, really highly encourage you to check that out on the CWE YouTube page. And we're going to go all the way through 8 p.m. today here in Glasgow with almost 10 sessions because there's so much to talk about when we talk about water, climate change, and adaptation. So I've got our schedule up here. I'm not going to go through everything. If you're here at the pavilion today, you can take a look over by the coffee center. We've got a list of all of our sessions that are happening today. I really encourage you to check that out. Before we get started, I just want to give a very quick example of why this is really important from my own, from my home and my own personal experience. And so I come from an area of the Great Lakes in North America, shared by the United States and Canada. And this is the ancestral and current home of the Anishinaabe people. And they are still there. They are still protecting these waters. Over here, we've got Gichigami in the Anishinaabe language, or Lake Superior. And this over here is us canoeing in the Boundary Waters wilderness. This is where I grew up. I grew up in these lakes, and they're being profoundly affected currently by climate change. And one example of this is the cultivation of wild rice, or manumin, which is a traditional food in the Anishinaabe culture. And currently, the Anishinaabe people are working together with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and others to protect this sacred food that has been threatened for actually hundreds of years, but more recently now by climate change. And they're working with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, with their scientists, with their traditional knowledge holders to help adapt to the changing climate, to make sure that these traditional first foods are still available for generations to come in the future. And so this is all about collaboration. We're going to hear about many, many different types of collaboration. And I'm really excited to actually just sit and listen today. We heard earlier in the earlier session from Brad Muggeridge at the University of Canberra that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, and it is to listen and to share with one another. And so I'm really excited to be listening to our speakers today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our first group. So we have Nick Hepworth and Water Witness International. They're going to be leading a session on the fair water footprint. So Nick, take it away.
Thanks very much. Good morning, everybody. And it's a real honour and a pleasure to welcome you to the global launch of the Glasgow Declaration for Fair Water Footprints this morning. The signing of the declaration is a momentous occasion. We really believe that it marks the beginning of the end of the abuse of water in our global supply chains, which pushes our people and our planet further into vulnerability to disease and climate change. It's the mechanism that will scale up water stewardship so that it becomes the global business norm rather than the exception. So this morning, over the next hour, you're going to hear from the founding signatories of the declaration about why they're signing, why they're showing the leadership right now, and the actions that they envisage around the declaration. We're also going to hear from people out there, from people on the streets of Glasgow and Edinburgh, and young people from across Africa about why the declaration is important for them. And then it's my pleasure to be joined by 4 of the technical experts from within the signatory organisations who are going to get into the detail and talk about how we're actually going to deliver this over the next 10 years. Then we'll hear some closing remarks from other founding signatories, and I'm delighted to say we'll have Henk Hovink, the Dutch Special Envoy, to leave you with some closing thoughts. Of course, we want to hear from you. It's a little bit of a shame that this is a small audience in the pavilion. There should be a link via YouTube for you to send in comments and questions, and we've got a mechanism which allows us to look at those and see those through the session. So I was going to introduce you to Kate Lamb, the Global Water Lead at CDP, who's been one of the architects of this declaration. Sadly, Kate's not so well this morning. Get well, Kate. So I'm going to talk us through the background to the declaration and why it's so important. To start that process, I'm going to show us a short animation, which should be shown about now. Thanks.
How fair is your water footprint? Nearly everything we buy takes a huge amount of water to produce. It takes 200 litres of water to make just 1 glass of orange juice. 8,000 litres of water to put together just 1 pair of jeans. And 12,000 litres of water goes into making your mobile phone. Put another way, the average UK household uses 2 bathtubs full of water each day through taps and toilets, and 72 bathtubs via the water embedded in the food and other goods it consumes. Often these are grown or made in places where water is in short supply or which face an increasingly chaotic climate. Where water is used irresponsibly within our water footprints, we are driving water crises. Where farms overdraw groundwater to irrigate crops, we increase the risk of drought and water conflict. Where metal mines produce toxic pollution, we push nature to the edge of extinction. And where factories overuse and pollute local water sources, we deny local communities the human right to safe water and sanitation. Research suggests that over 50% of the UK's water footprint is unsustainable, contributing to degradation and depletion of other people's water. But our water footprints don't have to be a bad thing. In fact, when water is used responsibly, our consumption creates much needed jobs, green growth and resilience to climate change, which gives you power and influence over how the world's water is used. A fair water footprint means no pollution, sustainable withdrawals, access to safe water supplies, toilets and hand washing, protecting and working with nature, and planning for droughts and floods.
So it's time for all of us to ensure that we have a fair water footprint. Businesses and companies should demonstrate responsible water use throughout their supply chains. Certification against the Global Water Stewardship Standard is a reliable sign of good practice. Banks, investors and pension funds should end support for water abusers and target investment towards responsible water stewards by strengthening due diligence and disclosure. Governments should ensure that stronger policy and laws are in place and implemented so that water is respected at home and in our globalised supply chains. Join the Fair Water Footprint Declaration and Partnership for Action at COP26 and help to transform the way the world uses water. Let us work together and lead the way to the resilient, sustainable and fair water future that we all need.
Yep. To build on the animation, to illustrate why we need this declaration so urgently, I want to introduce you to 2 people. On the left is Langsu Mumbalunga. Langsu is a farmer. He lives next to Chingola copper mine, Africa's biggest copper mine in Zambia. The copper mine makes the metal that is used in mobile phones like this one and the one that you've got in your pockets and the computers that you're probably watching this through. The copper mines sadly polluted the local groundwater with acid mine drainage and the local rivers, such that during the dry season, Langsu can't access the water that he needs to water his crops, and neither, like thousands of his neighbours, can he access water, safe water to drink from the local environment. On the right-hand side is Jorge Checa. Jorge has managed a farm for 25 years in Ica in Peru. They grow avocados, grapes, and figs. And ever since the boom in asparagus production in Ica to feed the tables and the supermarkets of Europe and the US, Jorge's been locked into conflict with the new water prospectors in Ica. Even though he's invested significantly in deepening the boreholes that he needs to water his crops in the dry season, he's struggling to access the water that he needs. And the water has gone salty because of over-abstraction, such that it threatens his entire operation and the jobs of the 700 farmers or 700 workers that work on his farm. So like millions of people around the world, Jorge and Langsu need us to ensure that our water footprints are fair. Our consumption dictates their well-being, their livelihoods, and their resilience to climate change. They need us to end the pollution and over-abstraction of water in our global supply chains. So building on this human case, the science for this is unequivocal. Oh. Okay. The science is unequivocal. So the IPCC report, AR6, tells us that we are now locked into an ever more frequent, intense cycle of droughts and floods. The IPBES report tells us that freshwater ecosystems are under most pressure and we're losing freshwater species at a faster rate than any other species on the planet. And the economic case is there for better water management. The World Bank tells us that unless we get better at managing our water, some parts of the world are going to be pushed towards losing 60% of GDP growth by 2050. Just to put that in perspective, that's probably a little bit more than the impact of COVID. At the same time, the UN General Assembly tells us that we're severely off track on the water-related SDGs. Now, we believe that more than at any time, we've got an opportunity to change this story. And let me tell you why. We've been gifted the work of two brilliant scientists. Tony Allen won the World Water Prize for inventing the idea of virtual water, that water use is embedded in the goods, services that we consume. Building on that work, Arjun Hoekstra developed the idea of water footprint, which allowed us to trace the water needed to produce the goods we consume or to supply a citizen or a town or a city or a country or a company, and it allowed us to trace that water use to sometimes distant catchments of production. And their work gives us new ways to think about water and to ask questions about the impacts and who's winning and losing through the water use that we use to supply our food, our clothes, and our other goods. And that provides us with an opportunity and an obligation to ensure that that water use is fair and sustainable. The other good news is that a lot of the mechanisms and tools that we need to ensure the sustainable use of water in our supply chains are already at hand. The hard work of organizations like the Alliance for Water Stewardship, CDP, CEO Water Mandate, GIZ, and many others, and a group of leading corporations, gives us the models that we need to scale up good water stewardship in our supply chains. We've also got lessons from 30 years of experience of making markets sustainable in other sectors. So we've been able to learn from the seafood sector, the forestry, from plastics, about how we can pull the levers of change to transform the use of resources in our supply chains. What's been lacking until now has been the global leadership to get this change in place. Now, I've been awed by the level of ambition that's been shown by the leaders of this declaration, the signatories of this declaration. The UK, the Dutch, Finland, Peru, Panama, Malawi, Madagascar, Unilever, Sainsbury's, Danone, Diageo, have joined a group of NGOs to set the ambition over the next 10 years, which will get us towards delivery of SDG 6. That leadership needs to be recognised and they need to be congratulated. Because this declaration is a significant leap forward. It commits the signatories to ensuring by 2030 that in their global supply chains, or the supply chains they have control and influence over, that there will be zero water pollution. They will take action for a fair water footprint by 2030 within the business operations and supply chains over which they have control and influence. I neglected to mention Evergreen and Actium, the investors that have joined this declaration. So what do we actually mean by a fair water footprint? Well, it means that there is zero water pollution in that supply chain. Not zero discharge, but zero negative impact. And this definition has been around in legal texts for 50 years or more, so it's not a radical ask. It's actually a legal requirement in most territories in the world. A fair water footprint sees sustainable water withdrawals, so not taking more from the environment that can be replenished through hydrological cycle, and not denying the needs of other water users downstream. It also requires the protection and restoration of nature, so using nature-based solutions, regenerative agriculture, ensuring that everybody in that supply chain has access to safe water, sanitation and hygiene, and importantly, ensuring that that supply chain plans for droughts and flood events and resilience to conflict, and that all that water use is legal. Yeah. So this isn't that radical. What's radical is the new mechanisms we're going to put in place to make sure that this becomes the reality. So in addition to the shared commitment of a fair water footprint by all signatories, there are individual commitments from each of the signatory constituencies: governments, business, financiers, and civil society and external support agencies. What's going to happen next? We've got the ministers signed on Friday. There's the global launch today. By next year, we will have firm plans from each of the signatories on how they will deliver this, and the indicators that will be set out and measured against to track progress and hold them to account for realising this over the next years. We'll meet annually to stock take progress, and we intend, with this small group of pioneers, to show how this can be done, so that by 2023 in UN Water, we're ready to take the mechanism to scale and get hundreds of signatories rather than the 28 we have today. Great. Okay. Just going back to my agenda, I'm now going to hand over to Nancy Tembo. Okay. She's coming through security. So we're going to go to Jan Wahlberg, the Chief Climate Change Negotiator for Finland. Finland have played a really important role in this. As soon as they heard about it, they said, yes, this is what we're doing anyway, and we will join you. So I want a personal thanks to Finland and your colleagues for their support in the initiative, and I'm delighted to hand over to you. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. Finland has 9% of the area is covered by lakes. It's a country of water, and it's I don't know, for my foreign minister, water diplomacy is one of the key figures in our action. So I think it's really appropriate that we are among the 28 pioneers. Like you said, I think let's hope that this group will expand rapidly. So I would just like to say a few words first about perhaps why Finland is signing to this agreement. I think there are two critical aspects that we need to take into account. One is the central role of water in both adaptation and mitigation efforts, and the other one is sustainability of production and consumption along international value chains. So it is in the key, water is in the key of all these ecosystems, interdependencies and responsibilities. And despite, I mentioned we have tons of lakes, 180,000 lakes. Depending on estimates, 50 to 80% of the water footprint of Finland consumption lies actually abroad. So that means that our water ecosystem, it is truly international and independent. Finland promotes the management of water resources in an integrated and sustainable manner, both nationally and internationally. Our aim is to secure sufficient availability of good quality water for the environment and all water uses, human consumption, industry, energy, food, and fiber production. Finnish Waterway, which is an international water strategy of us, supports the stewardship and partnerships. And I think this fair water footprint helps us in this partnership building and stewardship. Then a few words on the actions we intend to take in the declaration. We have set a high bar for Finnish companies with the national target for them to become leaders in water stewardship by 2030. A growing number of Finnish companies is committing to water stewardship via national and international initiatives, and this declaration provides an important framework for them. We are looking into opportunities for further deployment, water footprinting and water stewardship principles and approaches to water regional management, public procurement, development cooperation, due diligence and alike. So this current footprint could be turned into a fair and sustainable water handprint. While we consider leadership of governments and businesses central, I think we cannot forget the role of education and research, media and civil society to ensure that we are working towards targets that are aligned with public interest and that are science-based. And then let me finish by kind of a message to the other delegates to join us in this effort. Why do we think this is so important? For Finland, the declaration provides an opportunity to work as a champion. And by signing this declaration, we hope to spur fruitful debate and collective action to feed into the development of water stewardship policies and practices beyond our borders as well. But it's kind of no-brainer to be a champion without colleagues and competition. So there is no point unless we have others participating in this race as well. We thus call the delegates from other countries, companies, investors, NGOs and research organizations to join us in the race for water stewardship and fair and sustainable water footprints that is now starting. Thank you very much.
Thanks for those words of support. Thanks very much. We're just waiting for Nancy Tembo, who's the Minister of Environment and Forestry from Malawi. We're going to go, while she arrives, we're going to go to Michael Alexander, who is the Head of Global Sustainability at Diageo. Diageo played a key role in the development of water stewardship over the past 10, 15 years. And Water Witness has done some really interesting work with them in their supply chains across Africa. So I'm delighted to welcome Michael to give us your perspectives of the importance of this declaration.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you for the invitation to speak briefly. So the question, why would Diageo want to sign this declaration, and why would we want to be an early mover to sign this declaration? I think first and foremost, if we look at our own strategy, it's about helping us deliver our 2030 ambition on water stewardship. So we make no bones about it, it's about helping us deliver our strategy, a strategy that many other businesses have similar ones of, and therefore another reason for businesses to sign up. But I think the most important thing for us across this, and in addition to helping us deliver our strategy, would be around the collaboration opportunities. So we know, just like every other business, that we can't achieve our ambition without collaborating with others, without the collective action that we all talk about. And we're involved in a number of initiatives to try to drive collective action in different priority basins where we're located. We brew and distill our products in about 30 different countries around the world. About a third of our volume is brewed and distilled in highly water-stressed areas. So we have an obligation, we have a business driver, and and a real strong rationale for investing in water stewardship, but we can't do it alone. In order to address and tackle the systemic issues in our basins where we're operating, we need to work collaboratively. And this initiative helps us do that. It also holds us to account. So a declaration is not signed lightly by our business. It holds us to account to our strategy, to our commitments, to our targets, and that's hugely important. And another important part of why we signed was the inclusivity nature of it. We recognise we don't do it in isolation, we've got to do it with others, but we've also got to do it in an inclusive way. So if we look at gender or ethnic diversity, whatever we're looking at in our water basins and the issues that we're tackling, we want to do it inclusively. And this declaration, importantly, holds us to account to do it inclusively. So we do think it's important in terms of that option, that driver as well. I think one of the big drivers for us joining the declaration was around government engagement as well. So in many respects, many companies have been talking to each other, to other NGOs, to other stakeholders. We all agree that water stewardship is important, but we haven't got the scale and acceleration that we need at the moment. But by introducing a declaration which governments and businesses and civil society and NGOs and others are all at one, and the statement of intent is really powerful for us. So when we can go and speak to our governments locally where we're operating, we have a joint intent, we have a framework in which we can have a conversation, and that's hugely important for us in terms of engaging with government. And this declaration, I think, is the first in which we've signed jointly with government on progressive water stewardship. So I'd probably just end by saying that, you know, we can see a very strong and compelling case for signing the declaration. We know it's going to help us deliver our ambition. Part of our ambition demands us to work collectively, collaboratively with others in the priority basins where we operate. We need to do it inclusively. We need to do it critically with government, and we need to do it with other businesses as well. So I think this declaration pulls it all together. It's very compelling for us. It's a very strong call to action for other businesses and other stakeholders to join the declaration and to demonstrate that we really need to address the water crisis. So thank you, and look forward to hearing the rest of this conversation.
Michael, thank you very much indeed. You talked about accountability. One of the unique things about this partnership is that we're working together, business, governments, civil society, and universities and banks. We're going to hear now from Barbara Schreiner, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Water Integrity Network, the leading accountability organisation looking at water issues globally. Barbara's joining us by a recorded message from Berlin, which should be with us shortly.
Not only to commit to this important declaration, but also to speak today. Let me begin by introducing you to someone. Portia Mkhwanazi lives in Carolina, a small town in South Africa. She's a single mother of 3, Lorato, a girl of 4, Pretty, a girl of 6, and her firstborn son, who's just turned 11. She's unemployed. She used to work as a cleaner at a local hairdresser, but COVID forced the hairdresser to close, and she lost her job. She and her children live in a one-room shack on the outskirts of the tired town. She and her 3 children live at the center of a perfect storm. She has no tap near her shack. Even if she did, the water would be unusable. The taps in Carolina dispense acid water, caused by acid mine drainage from coal mines. At one point, the water in Bushmanspruit Dam, Carolina's main water supply, had a pH of 3.7, slightly above that of lemon juice. Portia Mkhwanazi doesn't have the money to buy bottled water. She's dependent on the municipality to provide her with potable water, a challenge that they're not meeting. The coal that is polluting her water is exported to power industry and homes in far-off countries, or burned in South African power stations. Mrs. Mkhwanazi can't afford the electricity that it produces. She uses a paraffin stove and candles. The coal that is polluting her water is driving climate change. Her world is changing. It's getting hotter, there's less rain, but more frequent and powerful storms, all of which makes growing vegetables to feed her 3 children increasingly difficult. No mining company around Carolina has come forward to take responsibility for the contamination of the water. Non-compliance with environmental and water legislation has been facilitated by the failure of government regulators to take action. Banks and financial institutions have failed to conduct proper diligence on mining projects. And so, Portia Mkhwanazi and her 3 children sit at the centre of a perfect storm. Portia Mkhwanazi is why this declaration matters, why it is urgent and important, and why it must be translated into immediate and lasting action. The Water Integrity Network has a vision of a world with equitable and sustained access to water, decent sanitation, and a clean environment, which is no longer threatened by corruption, by greed, by dishonesty, or willful malpractice. We've chosen to sign this declaration because we believe it is an important step in ensuring accountable, transparent and equitable water use. We believe it is an important step in improving integrity in water use practices. We believe it is an important step in holding those with power accountable in terms of their responsibilities, while protecting the rights of the powerless. We believe it is an important commitment in advancing global water justice and ensuring that Portia Mkhwanazi and her 3 children are no longer at the mercy of that perfect storm. We encourage all those with the power to make a difference, be they in the private sector, government or civil society, to commit to the Glasgow Declaration for fair water footprints to achieve water justice for Portia Mkhwanazi and all those like her around the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Some powerful thoughts there from Barbara Schreiner. We're going to go now to citizens' voices. So the team have been out on the streets of Edinburgh and Glasgow this past week to share the great news of this declaration with the public and get their thoughts on it and their feedback, with some messages to delegates at COP. We've also benefited from a link to an amazing organisation called Earth Guardians, who supports young people to speak out on the issues that matter to them across Africa. So we've got a short video to show to you now.
Lakini kwa ajili ya miundombinu mibovu au matajiri wakubwa waliojenga viwanda wametuchafulia mazingira.
Kiwanja cha polisi cha Ngozi hapo vyote viko jirani, ndio hawana bwawa pale la kumwagia maji, wanamwagia mtoni. Hata ukifuatilia unakuta ile maji yanapoingilia. Kwa
mizuri tu, kwa kuona samaki wengi, kambale wale, pelege, lakini sasa hivi hakuna kiumbe cha aina yote kinachoweza kuishi katika maji kutokana na uchafuzi wa mazingira.
Just suck it up, can I say that? And just get on with it, because we're tired of excuses and something needs to be done like yesterday.
We're not asking leaders to do anything other than listen to what the population, and I hope that through COP26 and activists and people marching that we can get a message for leaders to listen.
Just hope to goodness to think about the next generation to come and the generation after that.
I don't want to take other children's water. I don't want to defeat the planet. We need to take action now, not tomorrow. We need a fair water footprint.
Get out in front. Be the innovator. If you want a legacy, if you want to be remembered well, if you want to look your grandchildren in the eye, you do this now.
World leaders, we need your help, and we call upon you right now as the youth to support the declaration.
As we all agree, water is life.
L'accès à l'eau de qualité est un droit humain vital pour la dignité de chaque être humain.
Call upon all relevant stakeholders to lend us a helping hand.
If this is not observed, then the future generations might end up suffering.
Support the declaration, for together we are one. Together we can make change.
Great, some powerful voices there from out on the streets. So next up we have the panel discussion. So if I can welcome Andrew Roby from the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office. Andrew's a climate change advisor and water resource lead at FCDO. We're also going to be joined online by Rick Hodgeboom, who's the CEO of the Water Footprint Network, by Nadia Fransen, who's the Responsible Investment Officer at Actium, one of Holland's leading asset management companies. And we're going to be joined by Serene Malik, who is the Executive Director of the African Civil Society Network on Water, again, who've been a key driving force behind the declaration. Welcome, Rick.
Hi, good morning.
Hi. Just to guide this discussion, I've got a slide that's going to help us organise our thoughts a little bit. Are you okay to put the PowerPoint up? Next one. Next one. Great, that's the one. Okay, so this is a way of thinking about the levers of change that we need to pull on to get fair water footprints. And of course, this doesn't happen in a linear fashion. There are many complex feedback loops and interactions. But we think, in fact, we're informed by what's happened in other markets, that these are the levers of change and the constituencies to work with to get us to fair water footprints by 2030. And the multiple benefits for society and nature that will be delivered and the delivery of SDG 6. So what we're saying here is that we need knowledge and evidence of what's really going on and what works for water stewardship and fair water footprints. And that influences and drives citizen demand and civil society pressure for change. And that in turn can inspire new political leadership to put new regulations in place to change policy, which in turn can influence the way that global finance works and in turn influences the reach and behavior of corporations and companies in our global supply chains. Now, we've been lucky enough to partner with an organization called the International Institute for Environment Development, who've been able to harvest evidence of how this works in other sectors. So, for example, they're sharing knowledge with us about how, for example, knowledge and evidence on the impact of plastics triggered very rapidly a public outrage and a political response, such that in 2017 there was a TV show, Blue Planet, revealed the situation with single-use plastics and the impacts it causes in our oceans. And just a year later, widespread legal change to control the use of plastics, which has then triggered change within the private sector, such that in the UK, we've seen a reduction in single-use plastics by 40% in just 2 years' time. And we're on track to eliminate single-use plastics by 2025. So they've also harvested lessons from the seafood sector, from forestry, from agriculture commodities, which gives us important lessons about the links between these different levers of change, so that we can focus our efforts over the next 10 years. It also gives important lessons about accountability, about not excluding smaller producers that we need to learn from in this journey. So I'm now going to call on, I think it's Rick first, just to get his thoughts. Obviously, the Water Footprint Network have done an enormous amount to lay the foundations for this declaration with the science and the methodology. I'd like to call on Rick just to get his thoughts on how research, knowledge and evidence can push us towards the action that we need over the next 10 years.
Yes, thank you, Nick. Am I audible? Can you hear me?
We can hear you and we can see you. Welcome to COP.
Well, thank you. Remotely, unfortunately, but that's fine because of the technology. First of all, thanks, Nick, for having me here. And also, I would like to congratulate all the signatories for supporting this very important declaration. I'm very grateful that we also, as the Water Footprint Network, can be part of this. And I find it very, very important, relevant, and exciting. But if you ask from the perspective of the scientific community how we can make it happen, these fair water footprints, then let me just be bold. I think that we can make the fair water footprints happen because we know how to do it. And that's, of course, very short. So let me try to unpack that shortly for a bit. Water footprint assessment has a very strong academic backing. Almost 20 years ago, you already mentioned the late Professor Arjen Hoekstra kickstarted the water footprint research, as he saw how these global dimensions to water resources management were being overlooked in traditional discourses. And the core idea, and I would like to emphasize that, that is behind this, is that water demand and pollution are ultimately driven by consumption of goods and services that require water in their production. And therefore, it makes sense to study this consumption of goods and services in relation to their water use. And we have seen a very nice animation of that already. But from that core concept, over the last 2 decades, this concept has grown, it has matured scientifically, and we have developed tested methods, not only to measure footprints, but also to trace the water use and pollution, and to put these footprints in their proper context. So we can now assess whether those footprints are sustainable. Will they harm ecosystems or biodiversity? Are those footprints efficient, or is the water being wasted or polluted unnecessarily? And importantly for this declaration, is that footprint fair? What will it do to competition between different user groups? Who will win and who will lose? So in short, we know a great many things about that water footprint. We know where the hotspot areas lie. We know what sectors are contributing most to water scarcity and pollution. We know what sectors are at risk because of this water scarcity and pollution. And I think most importantly, perhaps, is that we know how to improve these footprints in their local context and in their global context. But there's a catch, because that may be a theoretical knowledge. And even though there are great inspiring cases of front-runner companies and governments that have implemented successful water stewardship practices to address their footprints in practice, I think that this implementation really needs a boost, and that this implementation lag is because we do not have all the actors together that we need. From the onset in water footprint assessment, we already knew that if we were to arrive at sustainable, efficient and fair water footprints, that was a shared responsibility where each actor had to play a role. Of course, we can study it from the outside, from our well-known ivory towers, but in the end, we will need the primary producers, the farmers, the companies, but also the policymakers, the regulators, the financial institutions, and what I started with, the consumers eventually to join us in this. And I think that the declaration brings together many representatives of such actor groups, which I reckon is very important to facilitate that collective action that earlier speakers have also addressed. So very specifically what we can do, and with that I mean the Water Footprint Network specifically, but also the broader scientific water community, we are eager to support all actors to better understand the footprints, to measure it, to contextualize it, to reduce it, and to make it fairer. The tools and the knowledge are there, so let's do it, and let's make those water footprints fairer.
Thanks, Rick. That's fantastic, and we're thrilled to get the opportunity to work with you over the next few years to get this all in place. And congratulations. Welcome aboard.
Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to go now to Serene Malik, who is the Executive Director of the African Civil Society Network on Water. Serene and her network represent the 400 million Africans that lack safe water and sanitation. Serene's been a really dynamic driving force behind this declaration. In fact, it's a challenge that she made, I think, to Minister Lord Goldsmith a couple of years ago that really got us rolling on this. So it's a real honour I hope she's there. She's joining from Kenya. Serene.
Here, Nick.
Oh, excellent. Wow. Great to see you. Serene, what's civil society's role in all this?
Well, first and foremost, hi everyone. Good afternoon, good morning. And again, thank you very much for putting us on the stage and really giving us this platform to engage. I'll share it with everyone. I did have a bit of an emotional moment on Friday when Anu was up there on stage, signing giving the speech, signing the declaration. So this is really a big step forward for us, and also venturing into new grounds. Now, I think just the way Rick mentioned, we already have experience in terms of how do we make this happen. As civil society, of course, we know it's politics and power, as well as enabling people to claim their rights to water and sanitation, no matter what shape or form that would take. What we've been seeing and what we as civil society have been leaning on are these partnerships, collaboration, joint statements that are actually being signed. So we're seeing a lot more of this being put on paper. And that honestly is huge progress, because it shows that there is a healthy respect for these partnerships, for collaboration, for the various roles that the different constituencies would play. But just very quickly, in terms of how would we make it happen and how would we unpack it? So a number of things. First and foremost, of course, is really looking at the implementation of some of these policies, or the development of some of these policies and laws that will allow fair water footprint, that will hold some of these sector players more accountable. Now, the idea is that these laws are already in place, but we are discovering little by little that, as new dimensions are added to the sector, there's a need for these policies to be a lot more responsive. And this is where I think civil society really comes in terms of evidence-based research, identifying, where the gaps and the loopholes, like the reports that have been issued recently, and then moving towards the action part. Now, I like quoting Nick on this, and I think this is a really important statement, where in the Water Witness report, it was found and it was discovered that 80% of the social accountability initiatives that have been undertaken by civil society yielded successful results. And that in itself speaks, I think, really speaks to the issue. An issue like this does require a certain element of oversight and social accountability. It requires the mobilization of communities at the ground. We saw from the videos where, we have people talking about, polluters discharge into their rivers and everything that comes with that. But who is bringing that voice at the big boys and girls table? It's generally civil society organizations. And I think that is really something critical to remember, where we make the invisible visible. At, of course, the policymakers level, we've seen across the continent civil society organizations mobilize, have tremendous convening power in terms of bringing the leadership to the table, tabling some of these issues, and already starting a discussion and a number of advocacy initiatives, raising awareness. So it's really a panoply of different initiatives and interventions that ultimately lead to the changes that we want to see. And finally, I think the issue of gender and geography, which is something really critical. And lately, civil society has been really been vocal on the issues of how of how climate impacts affect women and girls and affect vulnerable communities. And this also, speaks to a bit of the fair water footprints. It speaks to the issues of stewardship. All these videos that we have seen, except the one that Nick showed, shows that ultimately it's actually women that are heavily impacted by what is going on. So that's really, in summary, I'll keep it short in terms of why civil society organizations. We understand power and politics, and we have experience in enabling people to claim their rights. We have become masters of partnerships. We're seeing more and more civil society organizations expanding their memberships to include private sector, who have already ventured into water stewardship and have built a certain amount of capacity in there. The only thing we need, of course, are resources and your support. Over. Thank you.
Brilliant. Key points there. I'm going to go now to Andrew Roby, who, again, has been a real driving force behind this effort, and together with Lord Goldsmith, has really helped us get over the line with it. So, Andy, I'm going to ask you, what can governments do to pull these levers of change? What role do you foresee for both governments like the UK's, but also your counterpart governments in other parts of the world to pull the levers for system change that will deliver fair water footprints by 2030?
Thanks, Nick, and thanks a lot to your leadership in this. And we shouldn't go mutually backslapping each other too much, but I've got to say it's been an amazing last 4 months, just moving from August through to November and having 28 signatories on this. It's personally something of huge satisfaction to see this progress, but it's just the start. We keep saying the work starts tomorrow. Actually, it will start tomorrow with the planning of what action we are going to take as a group of countries, companies and other organisations, because that partnership from a UK government point of view is absolutely crucial. We don't like doing things on our own. It's been a long time since we called ourselves an empire when we ruled the waves, and this is certainly not the place and the time for that. And I just wanted to come back to something Michael said, Diageo, when I first moved into the water sector from years on forestry, there is a lack of space for consultation. And I think Sareen made that point extremely well as well. We're not hearing the voices around the table at the right time and the right place to make change happen. From a government point of view, I see three levers that we have, three things that the UK brings to this. We've brought some leadership with Lord Goldsmith and others, and through the COP26 presidency, that's quite a powerful voice, and we can do much more in that space. And we will continue to use our water diplomacy, to go back to Jan's point, to build that constituency in our countries through our 14,000 diplomats that we have. But we've also got a certain amount of control over our markets as we regulate markets, as we can subsidise, although I don't think this is the place for subsidy at all. And we can encourage companies and other players to take water stewardship much more seriously through disclosure mechanisms, through our public procurement policies for products, all sorts of ways like that. And thirdly, we've got development assistance. And obviously you've heard some of the commitments over the last week in nature-based solutions and adaptation. And the UK has a large fund available for that. And so I'm going to be pulling together a development programme to support people like Sareen and ANU, to support the space building and the evidence gathering, to build capacity in governments and in other organisations to bring about the change. Ultimately, having worked on the timber side for maybe 15 years, I see the power of consumer countries working with countries like Malawi to build partnerships together. We want this work to foster good business and investment in the supply chain. This isn't about divestment. It isn't about pulling business away from developing countries. This is absolutely not on our agenda. And if this program does that, we would be very, very worried and wanting to address that. We want to see engagement with supply chains on water security so that the case, for instance, of the asparagus in Peru can be multiplied up all over the world. I'll stop there for now. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks very much, Andy. We're going to go now to Nadja Fransen in Holland. What excites me about this initiative is that it's working with some really powerful constituencies concurrently to get towards the same end. So we've heard from civil society and the science community, from government. We're going to be working with the finance community. Now, the finance is hugely powerful. So they control the levers of our global economy. So I'm going to hand over to Nadja now to get her thoughts on how banks and investors can help us get to where we need to be by 2030 on water.
Thank you, Nick. You can hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I just first want to say that as Actiam, we are proud to be engaged in this declaration. We are working to support the transition to a more sustainable society already for some years. And unfortunately, in this transition in society, we see a lot of attention being paid to climate change, to some extent also to biodiversity, which are all very important, of course, but water is not always receiving also the attention it deserves. And therefore, we think this declaration is very important. We have already heard it more often these days. Insufficient care for water can have detrimental effects, and CDP actually already concluded that the cost of inaction for companies could be 5 times higher the cost of action. And that, of course, also from a financial actor perspective, is a risk for us, because if these companies face operational disruptions due to a lack of water or due to community conflicts on water, then this can affect their equity prices and also affect our returns on our investment portfolio. So therefore, we have in place already a target to reach water neutrality in our investment portfolios by 2030, and we are actually very happy to be supporting this target also by signing this declaration. I believe the potential for the financial sector to force change is huge. The sector already showed leadership at the Climate Action 100+, in which over 600 investors that represent $60 trillion US dollars in assets under management are united to provoke change with companies that are leading in the field of carbon emission, that have high carbon emissions. And it would be great if we can incite a similar effort in the field of water as well through this declaration and through enhanced cooperation that could be forced by this declaration. I think the 2 most valuable means that the financial sector has at its disposal to pressure companies to more sustainably manage water resources are, first, by carefully selecting companies to ensure that money flows to those companies that have sustainable water management or that provide solutions that can help in this, in solving this water crisis. And on the other hand, also stewardship can help. Stewardship with those companies that have lagging water management to pressure for improvement, for example, by talking to those companies or by issuing shareholder resolutions on their general meetings, etc. Research actually reveals also that this could have a very positive effect. I think the results range from 18 to 60% that of cases where shareholder activity has actually provoked change at companies, and then the lower percentages have actually been a longer time in the past. And it's often not always only those companies that are targeted by the shareholders, but also there are spillover effects to companies with overlapping directorships. So I think this, it's fair to say that the financial sector can have an important influence on companies' water management. We also see this in our own experience. We have been engaging on companies on water management for quite some time already. And more recently, we do see the developments that there is an increased interest from companies. They are asking us how we view sustainable water management, what type of targets they could implement, what are best practices, and they ask us to share learning. So I think this is a really interesting development, and it could even gain more momentum when we all sign this declaration and when we cooperate to achieve and promote fair water footprints. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadia. That's a brilliant contribution. And it is important to recognise the leaders that have come forward here. You know, we recognise how hard this is going to be. But what's been really inspiring over the past few months has been the level of ambition we've seen of people saying, yeah, we need to do this and we're ready to work together and roll up our sleeves to get it done. We know it's going to be hard, but if we've got a learning-centred approach, we can do it iteratively. We can say, right, these are the mechanisms we need to use. Let's try it. and if it's hard, if it doesn't work, let's work out why and what else we can do to get there. We really don't have any other option. Now, amongst those leaders, we ought to recognise Malawi. Right from the offset, Malawi has co-led this initiative with bold leadership from Minister Nancy Tembo and the team and civil society and scientists in Malawi. Malawi is already a leader on water stewardship. Some of the work they're doing there within their smallholder cooperatives on rice, on sugar, on tea is phenomenal. And the lessons that we all need to learn are emerging from the warm heart of Africa. Now, Nancy, the minister, is sadly stuck in security somewhere, but I'm delighted that we've got Dr. Ntupanyama, the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Forestry and Natural Resources, who's kindly agreed to step in and say a few words for Malawi. You're warmly welcome. You can take off your mask and we can hear you better.
Good morning, distinguished participants. Apologies for the minister. I think she must be stuck somewhere, but she committed herself to come to this launch of the declaration on fair water footprint. As you are aware, Malawi has signed this declaration, and we have signed it not just because we feel that we have to sign it, but we know that water is very important. And it is a very critical nature resource in the country. That's why we are trying as much as possible to protect it, because our agriculture depends on water. In terms of the women, in terms of even the industry. As we go towards Malawi Agenda 2063, water is very critical. Because we can go, our vision is for industrialization. If we need to go into industrialization full throttle, we need water, but we need to use it sustainably. We have faced a number of problems before. Schools closed down early because of lack of water. We've also faced a lot of problems where agriculture production depends on water, because we don't use water in the rainy season only. We use water in agriculture production, especially in irrigation. So water is very critical for Malawi, and that's why we signed this declaration. And we're very thankful that you also recognize Malawi as one of the pioneers in terms of water programs. And we also know that climate change has affected the water sector. It is one of the sectors that has been affected completely. And we are trying as much as possible that most of the projects also include watershed management, because we know that if we manage our natural resources, we are also, in terms of forestry and land management, we are also managing our water. We are increasing our water. We've seen different things happening when we have managed our natural resources. We've seen rivers that have not been flowing starting to flow just because we have managed our water resources. And as I indicated, while we do promote massive agriculture production and also massive industry, we want to use water sustainably. That's very critical for Malawi. So there are many things that I can say. I know that we really don't have much time, but we are so thankful that we could, our minister decided that we really need to declare and also be interested, because all our economy depends on water. And we will walk the talk. As I indicated earlier on, I keep on saying it again and again. We are committed to this because water is very critical. We have seen the problems that we have faced before, and we would like to have water and maximize the use of water, but maximize it sustainably. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ntupanyama. I hope I haven't garbled your name too badly. Thanks for stepping up and helping us at late notice. Yeah, please. Great. So we've got a little bit of time now for questions from the public. Now, this cuts through this declaration. It's inclusive. We want to hear people's voices. It's participatory. So the technology hopefully has enabled us to hear, for you to ping in some messages via the YouTube link or other means of connection. So I've got a few questions here. I'm going to draw on the help of the panel to try and answer some of them. The first question here is, we don't know who it's from, but what accountability mechanisms will be applied to prevent the corporate capture of the declaration and the dilution of the more ambitious targets? Serene, are you with us? Can you help us answer this one, or have you checked out?
No, I'm here, Nick.
Do you want to have a first stab at that? I've got some more ideas myself, but how do we avoid corporate capture in this?
I think we, as civil society, we have experience of what we call local elite capture, where we have initiatives or programs that are usually absorbed into much bigger, much more powerful type of entities. Now, in terms of mitigating that, I think it's really in terms of the partnerships and the collaboration, but also that Malaysia, like the rules of engagement among. Now, I'll give you an example, Nick. For example, in Kenya, we know that the Kenya Private Sector Alliance is the only non-state entity that actually has breakfast meetings with the president or members from the Kenya Private Sector Alliance. And on a number of occasions, we've had civil society try and piggyback on some of these initiatives to make sure that some of our messages actually go through. So that is one way of working. On the other hand, it's also in terms of keeping the momentum going in terms of what activities we're doing, counter messaging where we need to. And I think the more important one is the convening of some of these platforms and some of these partnerships. We will not see private sector convene that much. It's usually within the space of civil society to do that. So that gives a certain advantage to civil society to lead a bit on the discussion and to set the agenda where it can. So this is some of the methods that we have used in terms of managing some of these captures. Where it gets not problematic, but it is the desired state, is when the state itself comes in and picks up or absorbs or uptakes or duplicates the effort. Now, sometimes that is usually done as an antagonistic way of working, but sometimes it's not a bad thing in terms of them taking over the issue at hand. So it's in terms of understanding the context that we're working in, understanding the power dynamics of the various players that we have. In the case of Kenya, we have a very powerful private sector alliance, seeing how do we work with them, and also in terms of understanding the interests of the different groups. Thank you, Nick.
Thanks, Serene. Just to chime in there, I mean, if this is going to work, it needs to be trusted and legitimate to the public. And there's a challenge there. Let's be clear-eyed about it, because companies are often legally obliged to serve the interests of their shareholders, which don't always overlap with the needs of communities that live downstream of their farms or factories. And so from the very outset, water stewardship has put integrity and accountability at the heart of what it does. Over 10 years ago now, the CEO Water Mandates of the UN Global Compact and GIZ commissioned some work by the Water Integrity Network to develop integrity guidelines for water stewardship initiatives. So there's a lot of work out there for us to lean on, which guidelines around the transparency, inclusion, public interest outcomes that are monitored and tracked, clear indicators to make sure that this has the credibility and legitimacy and avoids the kind of capture that we could invite. Added to that is the role of the Alliance for Water Stewardship Standard, which is a third-party certified standard which verifies good water stewardship at the site level. Now, we're proud to have been involved in that initiative, and it's now being used, or the development of the standard, and it's now being used around the world by companies including Apple, Unilever, Diageo, and many others to provide oversight and third-party certification of their water stewardship credentials. And the scaling of the standard will be, and its use will be a key element of delivering on fair water footprints. So there are mechanisms to hold all of this to account. There's another question here from the audience that I'm going to put to Andy, or we can reflect on it. What are the resourcing requirements for this initiative, and where might the funding come from to deliver all the hard work that we need to get through in the next years?
As a government official, I'm completely not able to say anything about commitments for spending, except to say that, you've heard our grand figures, 11.6 billion that we're going to spend on climate finance, of which 3 billion is for nature, half has to be for adaptation. I'm expecting to get a slice of that, and there are commitments already internally about that, but I can't mention the figures. But I think it's not so much the amount, but it's how it's used. And we're certainly moving from FCDO point of view, from building infrastructure into creating the conditions whereby infrastructure is built, for instance. And I think in this case, we're looking at the governance arrangements and how we can support capacity building to enable civil society to hold business and government to account, for instance, to gather the evidence and so on. So, these are not very large sums of money. We're looking at convening spaces here and gathering a bit of science. What has surprised me about the water sector, having come from the forestry sector, is how little calling out is going on. There's lots of stories of woe and so on, but nobody is holding individuals to account. And my government is open to be held to account as well for this. And we're absolutely committed to that. So please take this at its word.
Great. Thanks, Andy. I think you're right. Delivering this isn't going to take huge sums of money. There is some money already in the pot from the Swiss, and they need to be recognised for that contribution. But a lot of this is beyond aid. It's about system change. It's about asking the right questions around investment decision making, in procurement decisions, to get the change we need over the next few years. So what I want to do now is to hand over to some of the other signatories to make some closing remarks. So there's a short video, then I'll hand over to Henk. Just the closing words from me. I think this is a really significant moment. What we've got here is the governments that represent a population of 180 million people on the planet, that represent nominal GDPs of $4.1 trillion, right? They've just committed to zero pollution in their supply chains, sustainable withdrawals, full access to wash for all workers, protection and working with nature, and planning for droughts and floods. Now that's significant. That gives us the momentum that we need over the next 10 years to deliver a fair water future. Now I can't end without mentioning the momentous events of Saturday when 100,000 people got on the streets in Glasgow demanding change, demanding a better use of natural resources and more equitable use of natural resources. This initiative is delivering on that. And the signatories need to be recognised for the leadership that they're showing. So thank you.
Hello, I'm Tim Wainwright from WaterAid, and I'm absolutely delighted that WaterAid is going to be a founding signatory of the Glasgow Declaration for Fair Water Footprints. It's about mitigation and adaptation. It's about people and planet. This declaration is going to accelerate action on water. Water, well, it's obvious, it's like oxygen. We cannot live without it. Everybody needs sustainable water, everyone in the world. But sustainable water needs collective action. We need to work across boundaries, we need to work across sectors. We need the private sector, the public sector, and the third sector to work together. Like, for instance, how WaterAid is working with its Resilient Water Accelerator, which is a cross-sectoral initiative to get more investment in sustainable water. So this commitment brings together, again, working across sectors, governments, companies, organisations all committing to improve their management of water, improving resilience, improving sustainable water use and preventing pollution, and all of this will go to help people get water, sanitation and hygiene by 2030. For WaterAid's part, what are we doing? We're going to work with the private sector, with our corporate partners, with our supporters, taking tangible action to make sure that global workforces have access to water, sanitation and hygiene. So we're delighted to be a founding signatory, and our congratulations to the organisers for the hard work that's gone into this. It's a good moment. Thank you.
As part of the civil society of Peru, at CEPES, we believe that the Glasgow Declaration for Fair Water Footprints will mark a very important event. Ours is one of those countries that is considered to have severe water scarcity problems in the coming decades. In fact, in the Andean areas of the country, where the main rivers are born, poverty is most concentrated. And from there, water continues to be taken to areas where it is very scarce. Additionally, the overexploitation of groundwater continues, as occurs in the Ica Valley, from where we export water to other countries in the fruits and vegetables produced in areas that until very recently were part of the desert. But it is not only a question of quantity. Added to the impact on water quality by extractive activities such as mining, hydrocarbon exploitation and agriculture is the lack of treatment of industrial and municipal waters. As in the entire region, in Peru we have laws aimed at water care, but these are not complied with or are limited. For them to be applied effectively, an effort from all of us is necessary. Authorities, companies, farmers, residents, and all of us who use water, so that what we frequently affirm is a practical truth: water is a vital element. The approval of this declaration is a step forward, but it also requires that it be more than good news. It needs to be widely disseminated for it to be known. It is also necessary to recognize the seriousness of the current situation, improving the quality of the information available, as well as giving a voice to those who are usually not heard. But above all, the commitment of all is necessary for this declaration to be fulfilled. At CEPES, we will continue to make efforts to recognize the importance of caring for water and the environment in general, to sensitize company and all stakeholders to the urgency of caring for water and its better management. Of course, also the authorities to fulfill their functions, monitor compliance with current regulation, and even more, promote among all actors in society the commitment to use water responsibly. We also used to say that we are citizens of the world. It is time to demonstrate it, adhering to this declaration, and thus try to amend the course we are taking in order to have a more just world in the future, in which water, nature and communities are respected and their ways of life are protected.
Unilever is proud to be a founding signatory to the Glasgow Declaration for Fair Water Footprints. As a global business reaching 2.5 billion consumers every day, we recognise the obligation and an opportunity before us to co-lead the responsible use of natural resources to protect nature and deliver on SDG 6, the human right to water and sanitation. The Glasgow Declaration represents a commitment by countries, companies, banks and civil society to transform the way that water is used in global supply chains by making the responsible stewardship of water the business norm. This is a breakthrough moment which will trigger the collective action needed to deliver the water-related Sustainable Development Goals by 2030 by ensuring that water is well managed and protected. It will make a key contribution to climate change resilience. The 5 commitments within the declaration of zero pollution, sustainable withdrawals, full access to wash, protecting nature and planning for droughts and floods are already embedded in the way Unilever does business. But the declaration will lead to new action and support for water for our suppliers and the transparent disclosure of our credentials as a leading water steward. We will also work with the partners to scale up and champion fair water footprints globally. We call on other companies and countries to join this leadership effort to transform the way that water is used in our global economy for good.
Hello, COP26 in Glasgow. I hope you're all doing fine. My name is Muti Khema, team leader with Baseflow, a local organization based in Malawi that is working to improve the sustainability of groundwater resources so that rural populations can have access to safe drinking water. Now, why is my organization focused exclusively on groundwater? The reason for this is because a large majority, about 60 to 63% of my country's population, depends on groundwater for their drinking water needs as well as for general livelihoods. But for the last 2 going on 3 decades, that groundwater resource that so many depend on has been under threat. Between 25 to 30% of hand pump sources, these are water points that tap from the groundwater, are not functioning at any one time. And that number has remained constant for the last 2 decades. And there's growing evidence and even acknowledgement by the government of my country that the groundwater resource is under threat and dwindling, and action must be taken. And this is why today the Glasgow Declaration for Fair Water Footprints is really important, not just to you who are here, but to us as an organization, because we can't solve this problem on our own, and we recognize that, which is why we're looking to partnerships and collaboration together with organizations like Water Witness and others that have signed up to the Declaration for Fair Water Footprints. And this is why we are signing up to it, so that we not only do no harm as is required in the declaration, so that we not only do good as is required within the declaration, but that we can do better for a fair water future for countries like Malawi and others around the world. I hope you also sign up to this declaration as I have. Thank you very much, stay safe, and enjoy the rest of COP26 in Glasgow.
Greetings, my name is Katarina Albuquerque and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Sanitation and Water for All Global Partnership, where we, together with our over 300 partners, including 85 governments, aim and work towards the realization of the human rights to water and sanitation, elimination of inequalities in access to these rights in order to achieve full access to both water, sanitation, but also hygiene at the latest by 2030. The decisions that will be taken in Glasgow this week are pivotal for our collective future and that of future generations. We know that 90% of climate change is felt through weather-related events. And this means that communities find themselves with either too much or too little water. Both extremes jeopardize our fundamental human rights to water and sanitation. As is too often the case, those in the most perilous situations are those who are the most vulnerable and marginalized in numerous other ways, and those that contributed less to climate change. They are also the ones frequently far from the corridors of power where decisions get made. And this must change. As a matter of human rights, states are obliged to ensure that priority is devoted to ensuring that water is available precisely for realizing human rights. For realizing the human rights to water and sanitation, the human right to food, the human right to health, and also the human right to a safe and clean environment, which was recognized by the UN as a human right just last month. The overall water needed for realizing human rights is comparatively small to the ways water gets consumed and used by large-scale agriculture and industry, but it's often not prioritized. Building political will around this prioritization means coming together across sectors and using multi-stakeholder approaches. At SWA, we promote the concept of mutual accountability as a pathway for working together to realize joint objectives. The Glasgow Declaration on Fair Water Footprint is a very important complement to our mutual accountability mechanism and is an opportunity for diverse stakeholders to be concrete in the actions that they will take in order to ensure sustainable water footprints, reduce the water consumption, but also focus first on the realization of human rights. We are very proud to be a signatory to the Glasgow Declaration, and we invite you to join us. Together we can, and indeed we must, forge a new pathway towards a sustainable, green and indeed blue future. Thank you so much.
Okay, yeah. Thanks so much. First of all, Nick, thanks so much not only for moderating this amazing and inspiring session, but more importantly for all the work you and your team have been doing to get us this far. And I'm pretty sure will get us further. With this energy and this commitment and dedication, we're sure we're gonna hit that marker you put on 2030, and I would say 2023. Yeah? First UN Water Conference organized together with Tajikistan. We have a session after this. I'm pretty sure at that time we have a lineup of countries, businesses, investors, NGOs, and across the world signing up for this water footprint. Fair water footprint. Andy, thanks so much for the UK government's commitment, your minister launching this global call and the Glasgow Declaration on fair water footprint. And some news, the Netherlands will sign too. So not major, but of critical importance in rallying this coalition across the world. We need this. And I would like to highlight two things to that. Yes, as we said with the high-level panel on water, understanding and governance are critical, but valuing water across cultural, environmental, economic, and social factors is of critical importance. And it means taking care of our natural resources, really taking care of water, knowing how to take care of that. That's almost an internal force. But the fair water footprint also touches upon this, here we are, Loss and Damage Day at the COP, about loss and damage in the context of water. This is about this very complex issue of how much water is needed for the consumption of a small part of the world that takes actually the biggest chunk of the water we have. And this is true for our largest economies, our largest investors and producers. And this is, of course, true for our largest consumers. So it really means that taking into account this perspective of loss and damage into how we use and take care of water is of critical importance. And at the COP, that drives change, because ensuring water management in its full capacity, inclusive, comprehensive and sustainable at the long term, will drive not only adaptation and resiliency and build strong communities, it also drives mitigation and will get us to a 1.5 degree world. So water is your partner, you could say. Invest in water. It trickles down across SDGs, it trickles down towards the 1.5 and our adaptation ambitions. And a fair water footprint holds us not only accountable, because that is the stick, but it is also the carrot. It helps us drive these partnerships, these better solutions that are sustainable. And I've been at this COP talking to private sector investors, governments, NGOs, individuals, activists, young and old from across the world. And they're all very dedicated and committed. But the footprint, the fair water footprint, helps them also on track. It is like, in that sense, a stick of an old woman or man that gives the support, or the young child's little two wheels on the extra two wheels on a bike. You need that level of support to ensure that you go further and beyond. Last, amazing team. I really want to again reiterate those compliments. Also continue to build on the partnership you forged at this COP. And let's make sure we get to the Dushanbe conference next year in Tajikistan, and then beyond to 2023, the UN conference, and have this coalition that drives the massive organizations across the world to have the impact we need for this fair, equitable, sustainable and resilient water world. Thanks so much. Lots of success. We're here with you and we're here to stay.